Look at this bag. It sells for 2,500 euros. It costs roughly 55 euros to manufacture. You cannot achieve that margin with performance marketing. You cannot convince a stranger to pay 5,000% markup using a Google search ad. That margin exists for one reason. The brand has created a preference that completely overrides price comparison. Yet, most companies we audit try to do the exact opposite. They bet the entire growth strategy on performance marketing. They treat brand building as fluff because they can't measure it in their attribution dashboard. The most profitable companies in the world know that performance marketing rents attention. Brand building owns it because it builds preference. If you rely on performance channels, you are constantly pressured to discount. A strong brand is the only asset that protects your margin, lowers customer acquisition costs, and raises lifetime value. Today, we look at the financial mechanics of how you build that asset instead of just renting clicks. Here is the financial reality for most high-ticket B2B businesses. Companies typically spend 80% of their budget into the bottom of the funnel to capture the demand. This is conversion marketing, paid search, bottom of funnel social, and retargeting. It feels safe because you can show an immediate return of your ad spend, but financially, this is a trap. When you spend 90% of your budget into conversion, you're funding bidding wars and paying a premium to attract customers that still won't convert because buyers don't know you, and they will choose a brand they already have affinity with instead. We call it the death zone, the point where you keep spending more, but the revenue flatlines. Why does it happen? It comes down to a simple market math. A few percent of your total addressable market is in market at any given time. Of course, this number depends on industry and categories, but overall, this percentage is very low. You don't need a new car, a new fridge, a new watch, a new sofa, new holidays every day. In addition to that, approximately 80% of buyers will choose a brand they already knew before starting their buying journey. Do the math. If only 5% of people are buying and 80% of those are going to choose a brand they already know that they have in their preference list, that leaves you with only 1% of the market ready to buy now and willing to consider a brand they don't know already. If you allocate 90% of your budget to performance marketing, you are dumping nearly all of your capital into fighting for that tiny 1% silver. Why do financially literate leaders let this happen? It's because of the attribution illusion. Your attribution dashboard systematically overvalues the bottom of the funnel, credits the final click or the final few clicks, usually branded search, retargeting, and ignores everything that created the demand in the first place. If you allocate capital based on attribution, you starve demand creation engines, preference, the ones that allow you to capture that 80% of buyers before they enter in the market, and you'll end up in overfeeding bidding wars that destroy your margin. To fix it, we need to look at the three financial levers that brand investment actually move: margin, CAC, LTV. First, margin. This is where Warren Buffett comes in. Buffett loves to invest in companies with preference power. He keeps saying your brand is your moat. He invests in Apple, in Coca-Cola, not because they have a great search ad, but because they had a strongest brand preference. Brand preference is what protects your margin from competition. If you rely on performance marketing, you are in a commodity. You're competing on price. When you build a brand, you're competing on preference. Second, CAC. In the short term, performance marketing looks cheaper. You put £1 in and you get £2 out. But over the time, the costs rise as you saturate the audience, dry your funnel, and the auction heats up. Brand investment works the opposite way. It lowers CAC over time because it reduces the need to bid. When a buyer enters a category, if they already know you, they search for you by your name. Brand search is cheap, organic traffic is free. By increasing your volume of people coming to you directly, you stop paying the platform tax on every transaction. Third, LTV. Customers acquired through brand affinity retain longer. They are less likely to churn when a competition offers a discount. Why this is invisible to your CFO? Because they're looking at harvesting dashboards like multi-touch attribution when they should be looking at planting dashboards. They are asking, what was the ROAS on that ad yesterday? They should be asking, are more people searching for us today than yesterday? You need to force them to look at the metrics that actually measure future demand: surveys, share of search, and brand lift. We need to validate this with the right metrics. We need to measure the planting, not just the harvest. Metric 1, surveys. The simplest and the most underused tool is questionnaire. Just ask, how did you hear about us? Why us? Why now? Why not us? This can be done at several levels in the funnel: account creation, appointment, post-purchase, and others. This exposed terrible issue with multi-touch attribution. I once audited a brand where a $250,000 a year attribution should credited only 2% of sales to social. Yet, when we implemented survey, mid-funnel, and incrementality testing, we found out that 30% of the buyers were actually coming from social. I've also seen 30% of buyers explicitly stating they bought because of recommendation. Attribution cannot see word of mouth. Survey can. Qualitative data provides a directional proof that your untrackable brand spend actually is driving the business. Metric 2, share of search. This is your financial proxy to mental availability. We worked with clients who stopped overspending on the bottom of the funnel and reallocate budget to discoverability. Over 3.5 years, they increased the share of search by 20%, and the result was a 125% increase in revenue. Notice the correlation. Share of search correlates with 80% of market share. More importantly, it is a leading indicator. Change in share of search tends to precede change in market share. If share of search is flattening, your future revenue will flatline, no matter what your ROAS says today. Metrics 3. Upper funnel website traffic. You don't need to wait for a sale to see if your marketing is working. You can track intent signals on your website. A visit from someone who saw a brand campaign and immediately check your pricing page or your store location demonstrate high intent. We model the value of these mid-funnel action: pricing, page view, store location search, and add to carts to see if a campaign is creating future customers. For example, leading up to Black Friday, you will see item views climb 4 to 6 weeks before the event. If you aren't driving that upper funnel traffic early, you won't have anyone to convert when the sales start. Metric 4, brand lift. Finally, we track the shift in perception. Brand lift is how we measure whether brand activity has actually changed what people think and remember about us. We run expose versus control survey to quantify the incremental lift in metrics like ad recall, awareness, consideration, and preference among our target audience. Brand lift is not a forecast of sales. It is telling us whether our campaign have increased mental availability and made future buying more likely. When a campaign generates meaningful lift in awareness or consideration, it has created an asset. More people know the brand and remember it and are willing to consider it. Over time, that larger ready to buy from us pool is what lowers acquisition cost when these people eventually enter the market. So, how do you operationalize this without wrecking your P&L next quarter? The rule is, stop feeding the dev zone and start feeding the brand. You do not need to ask for more budget. You need to reallocate the waste. Consistently find that 20-30% of conversion spend that is non-incremental. It is targeting people who have already visited your website repeatedly or bidding branded on keywords that you own organically. Cut that spend. Take that capital and reinvest it into brand building channels. But you must change the KPI for that money. You do not measure it on ROAS. You measure it on share of search. You measure it on how did you hear about us. If share of search is rising while your total marketing spend is flat, you're building efficiency. You are lowering your future CAC. If you work with high-ticket products, long consideration journey, or offline sales, we have a complete playbook, a Slack community, and a weekly Substack newsletter where we break down these financial mechanics. DM me or comment and I will send you the details.